If I had known that saying no just once would get me exiled from my son's house, I would have saved myself years of yeses. I can't look after kids, I told Chelsea. I have a cardiologist appointment. I was feeling pain last time. She didn't blink, didn't ask if I was okay. She just snapped her gum, crossed her arms over that always too tight workout top, and said, "Wow, so you're going to put yourself before your own grandkids now?" I said nothing. I just reached for my purse, calm, like always. That's when her voice turned sharp, venom disguised as outrage. "You're just a worthless old witch." Then, louder, "Don't you dare come back to this house?" Her voice echoed off the hallway walls. I swear the baby monitor on the counter blinked in response. And just like that, after years of picking up their messes, folding their laundry, staying late, coming early, cooking dinner when she forgot, I became disposable. The same woman who used to tuck their kids into bed, sing lullabies, and make dinner with trembling arthritic hands, was suddenly a witch. I didn't say a word, didn't cry, didn't ask her to reconsider. I just looked her dead in the eye, and I turned around, picked up the cardigan I'd folded neatly on the armrest, slung my bag over my shoulder, and walked out the same door I had come in through nearly every day for 6 years. No hug, no goodbye to the kids, not even a glance back, because something inside me broke. But not the weak part, not the part she thought she'd shattered. It was the illusion that what I gave them all those years had ever been valued. Outside, the sun was bright, almost blinding. The same sun that used to feel warm on the porch when I'd wait for their car to pull up, grandkids spilling out in squeals. But that day, it felt like exposure, like truth. I got into my car and sat there for a full minute before starting the engine. My hands didn't shake, my chest didn't tighten. There was only a strange clarity, like when you finally wipe a fogged-up mirror and see what's really there. She didn't say it in a moment of stress. She said it because she meant it. Worthless. That was her word for me. After everything. And somehow I realized I wasn't surprised. This wasn't the first time she'd bled me dry and made me feel guilty for having needs of my own. It was just the first time I saw it for what it was. Not a misunderstanding. Not a bad day. A pattern. I drove home on autopilot, hands steady, mouth tight. The same roads I'd taken every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday to their house now felt unfamiliar. Like I was going somewhere I hadn't been in years, somewhere that belonged to me. I pulled into my condo's driveway and sat still in the silence of my car. No screams, no sticky fingers on the window, no high-pitched chaos from the back seat, just silence. And somewhere buried under the echo of her voice, I heard something else. A whisper from my late husband, Jack, who always used to say, "Lorraine, dignity is a door they'll try to close on you. Keep your foot in it." That day, I didn't just keep my foot in the door. I walked through it and closed it, finally, behind them. My condo had never felt so quiet. The walls were the same soft eggshell I'd painted with Jack years ago. He hated the color, said it was too hospital, but I kept it anyway because it made the light feel clean. That afternoon, it felt like stillness I'd forgotten I needed. I looked at the photo on the mantel. Jack, smiling at me in that goofy windbreaker, squinting into the sun the day we bought the condo. I could still hear him clear as day. It's not much, but it's ours. Our own peace. No chaos, no noise, just us. He died 6 months before our son moved in with Chelsea. Never got to see how quickly family support turned into unpaid labor. How quickly a favor turned into a schedule. How easily his wife became the housekeeper, the babysitter, the scapegoat. I wondered what he'd say if he heard her words. Worthless old witch. I took a sip of tea and let it burn just a little. I needed to feel something that didn't break me. The ache in my knees, the weight in my chest, the hollow echo of being told I was disposable. It was all there. But so was something else. Something I hadn't felt in years. Stillness. Control. The feeling of being alone. And finally not resenting it. I looked around at my little condo, the half-knitted shawl on the couch, the crossword book open to page 47, the untouched lemon drops in a dish no grandchild had pilfered for once. This space was mine, every inch, and suddenly, it felt like a sanctuary instead of a sad afterthought. I picked up Jack's photo. "You wouldn't believe how they talked to me," I whispered. "How they made me feel like I owed them my breath." The picture didn't speak, but I could feel what he would have said. "You're not a servant, Lorraine. You never were." I hadn't realized until now how deeply I'd let them shape the narrative, calling it helping when it was servitude, calling me selfless when I was being used, saying I was family when I was treated like a fixture. That day, in my own chair, in my own house, with my own tea, I remembered something that should never have been forgotten. They needed me, but I never needed their permission to stop. It started small, a few nights a week, watching the boys while Chelsea ran errands or just needed to get out of the house. Then it was weekends, then overnights. Then suddenly I was the first call at 6:15 every morning and the last text at 9 p.m. "Can you grab groceries for the kids? Can you come early? Travis is teething. Don't forget to do laundry, the machine's acting up." Not requests, assignments. And every time I opened my mouth to ask for even a single day for myself, Chelsea's eyes would go narrow, like I'd insulted her personally. "You said you'd help. Are you backing out now? And my son? David?" He always said the same thing. "Come on, Mom, it's just until we get back on our feet." It had been 6 years. 6 years since they'd gotten back on their feet. 6 years of me folding baby onesies, scrubbing toddler stains out of beige carpet, reheating dinners for 2 people who walked in late without a word of thanks. I told myself I was lucky, that I was still needed, that this was the role women like me were meant to play, useful in the shadows, smiling on demand. But somewhere in that swirl of grateful servitude, I stopped seeing myself. I didn't read anymore. I didn't garden. My crochet project sat in the same untouched bin for 3 winters. I gave up book club because Chelsea said it, quote, conflicted with bath time. I gave up my time so they didn't have to give up any. And all the while, they said it with a smile. "We're so grateful, Lorraine. You're a lifesaver. We couldn't do this without you." That wasn't love. That was leverage. Looking back now, the truth is so clear it hurts. They never said thank you when I brought groceries. Only when I didn't forget something. They never offered gas money. Just complaints when I was 5 minutes late. They never asked about my health. Just assumed I'd bounce back from hip injections and migraines because the kids need you. They called it family duty. But what they really meant was, be quiet, be available, and don't ask for anything in return. The worst part? I let it happen. Not because I was weak, but because I believed that love was something you proved by how much of yourself you gave up. And Chelsea? She wrapped it in ribbons of obligation and manipulation so neatly. I couldn't see the strings until they were choking me. Calling me a worthless old witch wasn't a slip of the tongue. It was the truth finally spoken when she realized I was no longer willing to be used. I set my tea down, walked over to the drawer Jack used to call my everything drawer, the one I hadn't opened in years. It was cluttered with old coupons, warranty booklets, a flashlight that didn't work anymore, and underneath it all, folded in a brittle manila envelope, the deed. Not to this condo, to that house, the one they lived in, the one they said they'd take care of for me after Jack passed, the one I let them move into because I thought it would help them get ahead. My name was still there, clear as day. Lorraine May Dalton, sole owner. My hands didn't tremble this time, because the sting of betrayal, it was already turning into something else. Resolve. Chelsea told me never to come back. Funny, because legally speaking, she's the one who doesn't belong there. I sat there for a long time, staring at the paper like it might catch fire in my hands. But all it did was confirm what I already knew deep down. They didn't own a damn thing. They'd lived there like squatters with a kitchen renovation. Made choices like the title had been rewritten just because they said so. New paint, new backsplash, new couch that I wasn't allowed to sit on unless the boys weren't home. Chelsea always made it sound like they were doing me a favor by keeping the house in the family. What she really meant was, thanks for the free home, now shut up and stay useful. But this brittle old paper, yellowed around the edges, had a power Chelsea never counted on. It said, I still exist, I still own, I still choose. I placed the deed gently on the dining table, unfolded, and fully visible under the glow of the pendant light. There was no mistake, no joint title, no amended trust, not even David's name, just mine. A little laugh escaped me, dry, surprised. They had built a life on something they didn't even bother to secure. Because why would they? I was always so compliant, so easy to manipulate with phrases like, we thought you'd be happy for us, or you always said family comes first. They thought my silence was weakness. They never realized it was patience. I took out my reading glasses and pulled a fresh legal pad from the drawer. Then I did something I hadn't done in years. I made a list, not of chores, not of things to buy for their kids, but of next steps. Call Alvin. Confirm property title. Request revocation of verbal permission. Review estate protections. Document all communication. The list wasn't long, but it was sharp. I folded the deed and placed it in a protective sleeve, slid it into a new folder labeled Dalton Property Private. Then I set the folder on the coffee table, right next to Jack's photo. I'm going to handle this, I told him softly, and I'm going to do it with the same grace they thought was weakness. Because here's the thing about a woman like me, you can underestimate her, you can insult her, you can even use her for a while. But if you ever forget what she's built, if you ever mistake her silence for surrender, she'll remind you, with documents, not drama. I stood up, poured the rest of the tea down the sink, and rinsed the cup clean. Tomorrow, I'd make the call. But tonight, I'd sleep. For the first time in years, not as a helper, not as a grandmother on call, as a homeowner with a plan. And in the morning, while Chelsea dropped the kids off at daycare and scrolled on her phone, convinced I was still licking my wounds, I'd be sitting across from a lawyer, with the deed in one hand and her eviction in the other. Alvin picked up on the second ring. Lorraine, he said, his voice like a warm, familiar hallway. Haven't heard from you since we filed the condo title. I need your eyes on something, I said. I think it's time we talked about the other property. He didn't hesitate. You want to come in today? I'll bring the deed. By noon, I was sitting in his office, same leather chairs, same outdated wall clock ticking a little too loudly, same soft jazz humming in the background. Alvin always liked a bit of Miles Davis while reviewing documents, said it calmed his brain. I handed him the folder. He unfolded the paper carefully, scanning the details with his reading glasses perched halfway down his nose. After a few minutes of flipping, checking dates, and typing a few things into his system, he leaned back. Well, he said, this is about as clear-cut as it gets. So it's still mine? He looked at me over the rims of his glasses. Lorraine, that house was never not yours. You are, and have always been, the sole legal title holder. There is no transfer, no lease, not even a cohabitation agreement on file. Whatever they've been living on, it's been your good grace. Nothing else. I sat back, let the words settle into the silence between us. I don't know what I expected. Maybe some complication, some catch. But there wasn't one. They never even tried to take it properly, because they assumed they already had. I want to revoke verbal residency, I said. And I want to secure my estate before someone else gets smart. He nodded, already reaching for the proper forms. We'll file a formal notice of revocation of license to occupy. 30-day notice. No need for drama, just the facts, sent by certified mail. And we'll update your estate protections while we're at it. He paused, giving me a look I hadn't seen from him before. Not professional, not polite, respectful. You sure about this? I've never been more sure. And I meant it. Because I wasn't just doing this out of anger. I was doing it for the woman I used to be. The one who made soup from scratch and quietly served it to a daughter-in-law who rolled her eyes at the smell. The one who sat in the back seat while Chelsea told the kids, "Grandma's just tired. Don't ask her too many questions." The one who was told, "You'll always have a place with us," only to be screamed at like a burden the first time she asked to live her own life for one afternoon. I was done apologizing for having a pulse. Alvin slid the first form across the desk. Initial here and here. Each pen stroke felt like a gate locking shut behind me. Not to trap me, but to keep them out. When we were finished, he handed me a clean folder with copies of everything. "Certified mail will go out by tomorrow," he said. "We'll keep it all civil, all airtight." I nodded and stood to leave. But before I reached the door, he added one more thing. "Lorraine, I've seen a lot of parents cave when the guilt starts up again. Be ready for the calls, the tears, the apologies with conditions." "I'm not looking for apologies," I said, hand on the doorknob. "I'm looking for freedom." And by the time I got home, the birds were back at the feeder outside my window, chirping like the world didn't know something had just shifted. But I knew. Because with every legal form filed, every line initialed, I wasn't just reclaiming my house, I was reclaiming myself. I slept better that night than I had in years. No guilt curling around my ribs. No phantom vibrations from Chelsea's daily, "Can you come by?" texts. No toddler tantrums echoing through my ears. No wet towels to pick up. No crusted oatmeal bowls left in the sink. Just me, a clean pillow, and the slow, steady realization that I had drawn my first real boundary. And it wasn't an argument. It was a document. The next morning, I brewed a fresh pot of coffee. Not instant, not the burnt half cup I usually slurped on the road to their house. Real coffee. I sipped it on my small patio, watching the birds nest outside the kitchen window. A mama robin was weaving bits of string and leaf into the crook of a gutter pipe. Focused, precise. I watched her for a long time. That bird wasn't asking permission. She wasn't worried someone might come scream at her for needing her own time. She just built, quietly, patiently, for herself. The mailbox clicked around 10:30. I opened it and saw a familiar envelope. Alvin's return address printed neatly in the corner. Inside, copies of everything I'd signed, sealed with gold-lettered paper clips and a note in his handwriting. "You did the right thing, eh?" I slid the documents into my lockbox under the bed, the same one I used to keep just for jewelry and Jack's old watch. Now it held something far more precious. My name. My choices. My line in the sand. By noon, Alvin had called to confirm the revocation notice had been mailed by certified carrier. A clean 30-day window. No drama, just dignity. That afternoon, I sat down and did one more thing. I logged into the estate portal he'd set up for me years ago and updated every protection clause I'd neglected. Chelsea and David's names, removed. Successor agents for healthcare and financial power, replaced with a professional fiduciary. Alvin recommended someone with no emotional strings to pull, no manipulative but mom games to play. And just like that, they were out of my paperwork, which, to be honest, mattered more to me than the house ever did. Because when someone screams that you're worthless, when someone treats you like a live-in maid disguised as grandma, the real poison isn't just the insult, it's the way it makes you question whether your time was ever yours to begin with. Not anymore. Now, every inch of this process, every notarized signature, every confirmed mailing, every frozen asset transfer, was a brick in the new wall I was building around my peace. Not to shut love out, but to keep manipulation out of reach. Later, I made a tuna sandwich and sat by the window, watching the nest again. The mama bird was still there. Unbothered. Chelsea used to say I had too much time on my hands when I noticed little things like that. I think now, more than ever, she feared what I might do with that time once it was finally mine. The envelope was heavier than it looked. Not from the paper, just the weight of what it carried. 30 days. That's what they had left. 30 days to pack up their excuses and their gaslighting and their unpaid debts. I stood in line at the post office with that envelope clutched to my chest like a final chapter. No tremble. No second thoughts. The woman at the counter smiled when she saw the label. Certified? Certified. Return receipt requested. She slid the envelope through the scanner. The red light blinked once, then twice. Anything else you need, ma'am? Just peace, I thought. No, I said. That'll do it. She handed me the receipt and I tucked it carefully into my wallet. On the way home, I stopped at the florist and picked up a small bouquet, nothing fancy. Just white daisies and a single yellow rose. Something about it felt appropriate. I placed it in a vase beside Jack's photo when I got back. You'd have handled it with more fire, I told him, smiling. But this is my version of justice. I didn't call anyone to tell them what I'd done. No announcements. No smug celebration. Because real freedom isn't loud. It's quiet. It's the sound of no phone call to return. No errands to run. No guilt to manage. That night, I slept with the window cracked just enough to hear the wind, and in the morning, I woke up and made breakfast for myself. 2 eggs, buttered toast, and coffee. Not because someone was hungry or late or forgot their granola bar. Just because I felt like eating something warm. Then I sat down at my desk and wrote the letter. The formal one. Typed. Professional. Calm. To Chelsea and David. This notice is to inform you that effective immediately, your license to occupy the property at 215 Gablewood Lane is hereby revoked. As per the enclosed legal documentation, you have 30 days to vacate the premises. No further communication is necessary. Sincerely, Lorraine M. Dalton. I printed 2 copies and placed them in clean envelopes. One would be posted on the front door via certified courier, the other mailed directly. I didn't write anything personal, because everything personal had already been said the moment she called me a worthless old witch. That was her goodbye. This was mine. And mine came with paperwork. Alvin called me around 2 p.m. They'll get the notice tomorrow, he said. Legally, they can respond, but they won't have much ground to stand on. I'm not worried. You sure you're okay? I paused. Was I okay? No, not completely. But I was clear. And that clarity was worth more than comfort. I'm better than I've been in years, I told him. And it was true. Later that evening, I stood at my window, holding a cup of tea. The robin's nest was almost finished now. All that patient weaving. No applause. No audience. Just one small creature building something no one else could take from her. I reached for my pen and wrote in the margin of my notebook, Dignity doesn't knock when it returns. It walks straight in because it never should have been asked to leave. And that night, I lit a candle, placed it by the door, and whispered one thing into the stillness. I'm home. Chelsea must have opened the envelope around 10:15 a.m. I say that because the first missed call came in at 10:18, then again at 10:20, and again at 10:23. 14 missed calls in less than 6 hours. Voicemails piling up, each one messier than the last. The first, cold, clipped. You can't be serious, Lorraine. This must be a mistake. Call me back. The second, angry. You're being so dramatic. Over one little argument? Grow up. By the 6th one, she was crying. The kids don't deserve this. You're abandoning your family. What am I supposed to tell them? I didn't listen to the rest. I didn't need to. Because when people like Chelsea lose control, they cycle through the whole wheel. Rage, denial, guilt, and eventually, begging. But I'd already been through every stage too. Years of being made to feel like nothing. Of wondering if I was too sensitive, too stubborn, too ungrateful for resenting how much of my life had become theirs. Now I wasn't wondering anymore. I was watching their illusion of ownership collapse in real time. Like a sandcastle swept away by a quiet tide. I muted my phone. Let the voicemails rot. I didn't owe her my attention. That afternoon, I made lemon muffins and dropped them off at the senior center for the Wednesday volunteers. I sat with Judith and Evelyn in the courtyard, listening to them argue about the best pie crust recipe while the sun warmed my back. I smiled more in that hour than I had in months, because while Chelsea screamed into the void, I was finding out who I was without their noise. Around 4:45, I glanced at my phone one last time. Missed call. David. The name hit me like a soft knock on a door I hadn't opened in a while. He hadn't called in weeks. Not when I got my heart results back. Not when I sent a birthday card to his youngest with a $50 bill inside. But now, with the house slipping out from under them, now I was worth a phone call. I didn't pick up. Because if he wanted an explanation, he already had it. In writing. And more importantly, in history. He let it happen. Every eye roll from Chelsea, every time she handed off the kids with no thank you, every time she dismissed me like I was one of the unpaid appliances humming in the background, he saw it. And he stayed quiet. So I would too. But not in defeat, in power. That evening, I sat on my balcony with a blanket and a book, watching the city settle into dusk. My tea cooled too fast, but I didn't care. Because in that fading light, there was no dread, no next shift to prepare for, no errand list, no guilt, just silence, and the occasional ding of another ignored call. Inside my phone, Chelsea's voice kept looping. Outside, the wind blew steady through the leaves, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel owned by anyone, because this was the sound of their world collapsing. And me, finally, free. He showed up the next morning. I saw his car pull up from my kitchen window. Same silver SUV. I helped him co-sign for, back when he said he just needed a little help getting started. I didn't rush to the door. I didn't fix my hair. I didn't even move from my spot until the doorbell rang. Twice, then a pause, then once more like he used to as a kid when he was nervous. I opened the door slowly. David stood there, unshaven, tired, and trying too hard to look composed. I didn't smile. I didn't hug him. I simply stepped aside. You can come in, but if you raise your voice or make this about Chelsea, I'll ask you to leave. He nodded, quiet, obedient for the first time in a long time. We sat across from each other at the small round table where Jack used to do his crossword puzzles. David looked around like he hadn't noticed how clean, how peaceful, how mine this space was. Why? He asked finally. I tilted my head. Why? What? Why are you doing this? My hand stayed folded in my lap. I didn't do anything, David. I simply acted on what you both made very clear. He flinched. Mom, come on. Chelsea was just upset. You know how she gets. She called me a worthless old witch. He blinked. I know you heard her. I mean, yeah, but she didn't mean it. She meant it enough to say it, I said, voice steady. And I meant it enough to act. He looked down at the table, jaw clenched. I waited. You didn't even give us a warning, he muttered. Oh, David, I said, soft but sharp. You had 6 years of warning. His head snapped up. 6 years of laundry, and groceries, and babysitting, and cooking, and silence. That was the warning. Every time I swallowed my needs so you wouldn't have to lift a finger, that was the warning. He looked like he might cry. I didn't. I'd already done all my crying in the passenger seat of that SUV while Chelsea complained about how tired she was from getting her nails done. I'm your son, he whispered. You're a man who let his wife use his mother like staff. That's not the same thing. He stood, suddenly defensive. We were just trying to keep the family together. No, I said firmly, rising too. You were trying to keep the free labor together. Let's be honest for once. We stood in silence. Years of unspoken pain filled the air between us like smoke. And finally he broke. So what? That's it? You're cutting us off? I took a deep breath. You both told me not to come back, so I didn't. You said I wasn't wanted, so I listened. And now? I'm not cutting anyone off, David. I'm just taking my keys back. He didn't know what to say. That was the cruelest part of control. When it's gone, people don't know who they are without it. He left without slamming the door. That was his version of restraint. And I watched his SUV disappear down the street, remembering every time I rode in that car, clutching a grocery list and pretending not to hear Chelsea complain about how old people forget everything. She forgot one thing. I still remembered how to stand up. And now, I was standing. The next day, I sat down at my desk and opened every account that had their fingerprints on it. Water, electric, trash, internet. I had paid the deposits, set up the auto pay, given them my email, just to make things easier back when they moved into my house and said, "We'll cover it soon, we promise." They never did. I logged into each portal, one by one, and clicked Cancel. Cancel service. Change mailing address. Remove authorized users. Each click felt like a hinge unfastening from a door I'd never meant to open so wide. I submitted a change of address for the property taxes too. For years, they let the notices pile up on the kitchen counter, marked unopened. David always said, "We're fine, Mom, it's covered." It was never covered. I had the late fees to prove it, so I redirected everything back to me. Because that's what this had always been. My name, my burden, my responsibility. And now, it was finally my control again. The phone rang halfway through. Chelsea's number. I let it ring. No voicemail this time. Just the sound of her rage running out of places to land. They were feeling it now. The shift. No electricity soon. No Wi-Fi. No trash pickup. No cozy cocoon of unearned comfort. And soon, no roof either. I didn't feel guilty. I felt restored. That evening, I sat on the balcony with a warm bowl of soup and a wool shawl I hadn't touched in months. The knitting needles were still tucked into the last row where I'd left them back in April, when Chelsea called in the middle of dinner and said, "I need you here in 20 minutes. He won't stop screaming and I can't deal." I dropped everything, left my food on the stove and my pattern half finished, and showed up again, because that's what family was supposed to mean. But now, family meant not having to scream just to be heard. Family meant you don't get to use someone until they're dry and then call it love. And as I took up the needles again, slipping the yarn through one loop at a time, I felt something soft click into place. Autonomy. People think taking back your life comes in grand moments. Sometimes it does. But sometimes, it's just canceling an electric bill. Sometimes it's clicking remove next to a name that once had every key to your peace. Sometimes it's knowing the dinner you just made is for no one but yourself. I finished 3 rows before the phone buzzed again. David. Then, 2 minutes later, a text. "Please don't do this. We'll be homeless." I stared at it. No apology. No accountability. Just panic. Typed out like a receipt for all the years I let them call me inconvenient whenever I had a doctor's appointment or needed a day off. I didn't reply, because by now I'd learned people who ignore your boundaries always act surprised when you finally enforce them. I turned off my phone, folded the shawl over the back of my chair, and rinsed my soup bowl in silence. The birds outside had gone to roost. The house on Gablewood Lane would go quiet soon too, because the woman they called just the help had finally stopped helping and started reclaiming, one click at a time. By the end of the week, I had everything I needed to finish what they started. They told me not to come back. They called me names in a house I owned. So now I was closing the chapter, legally, financially, and quietly. Mr. Alvin called to say the escrow agent had confirmed interest from 2 buyers. "The market's strong," he said. "If we list next week, you'll likely have multiple offers." "And Chelsea?" I asked, sipping from my mug. "They still haven't responded through formal channels. But we're within our rights. We have documentation. And come day 30, you're free to initiate formal removal." His voice stayed neutral, but I could hear the question under his words. "Are you really going through with it?" And the answer was simple. Absolutely. Because I'd spent years living in the cracks between their needs, years feeding their pride while starving my own peace, years pretending they didn't mean it when they rolled their eyes or told me to stop making everything about you. Now, I was making everything about me. I made an appointment with a locksmith for the morning after the 30-day window closed. "Do you want the fancy smart locks or traditional keys?" he asked. Just something quiet, I said, but secure. That Friday, I met Alvin at the house on Gablewood Lane. It felt like visiting a grave. The curtains were drawn. The porch had toys scattered across it like forgotten promises. Inside, the air felt stale. Furniture I had bought sat worn and abused. Floors once scrubbed by my hands dulled under years of lazy feet. I didn't linger. I walked the perimeter while Alvin went over the agent listing form. In the living room, I picked up a framed photo they'd left on the mantel. Chelsea, David, the boys. I wasn't in it. Never had been. They cropped me out long before they screamed me out. I left the photo on the counter with a small envelope. Inside, a copy of the final property transfer notice, the scheduled date for sale, and a check for their moving deposit. A gesture, not a gift. I wasn't cruel, but I was done. The locksmith arrived promptly the next morning. He was young, friendly, and didn't ask questions. Just went to work, replacing the lock on the front door and installing a new deadbolt on the side gate. I stood on the lawn, arms crossed over my chest, watching the house like a stranger would. It didn't feel like home anymore. It hadn't for a long time. But it didn't feel like a loss either. It felt like closure. By noon, the locks were changed, the keys handed to me. The for sale sign went up a few hours later. Clean, professional, undeniable. I didn't text them, didn't warn them. Because I already had. With every diaper changed, every dinner reheated, every unspoken hurt swallowed. 2 weeks later, the certified letter reached her. I know, because Alvin called and said simply, "Received. Signed by Chelsea M. Dalton." He didn't say more. He didn't have to. I could imagine it clear as day. The clumsy scrawl of her signature on the green slip, the slow realization creeping in as she opened the crisp white envelope, one that didn't come with a baby shower invite or a birthday card or a check just to help. This one wasn't wrapped in love, it was wrapped in finality. The letter was direct, legal, emotionless, the kind of voice she'd never heard from me before. And in that silence, something I'd never expected happened. She stopped calling. No voicemails, no texts, no threats disguised as apologies. Just silence. I didn't mistake it for peace. People like Chelsea don't go quiet because they understand. They go quiet because they're recalculating. Still, I let the silence stretch. I filled it with walks to the park, with crossword puzzles and short phone calls with Marjorie, who started asking if I wanted to host bridge night at my place again. And then, out of nowhere, one afternoon, a Thursday, a letter arrived. Not typed, not certified, just a plain white envelope. No return address, but the handwriting was hers. Sharp, slanted, heavy like an apology forced through gritted teeth. I sat at the table for a full 5 minutes before I opened it. The letter was 1 page long. "Lorraine, I don't know what you're trying to prove. We said things in anger. You're punishing us for one mistake. But if you're going to throw everything away, fine. I guess you won't care that we can't find a place in the school district, or that the kids cry when we pass the house. I guess it doesn't matter to you that David's hours got cut or that we don't have help anymore. If you want to make your point, congratulations, you made it. But if there's any heart left in you, we could still use some money. Chelsea," I folded the letter without finishing the last line. I didn't need to. She wasn't sorry. She was scrambling. They came on a Saturday. Unannounced. Like always. Like the rules didn't apply if they were the ones showing up. Chelsea's car pulled into the lot of my senior community around noon. Far too shiny for someone claiming they couldn't afford rent. David sat in the passenger seat, arms crossed, shoulders hunched. Their oldest boy was in the back seat, his face pressed to the window, like he didn't understand why this drive didn't end in Grandma's warm kitchen anymore. I watched from the garden bench. Didn't move, didn't hide. Just sat there with Marjorie, the sun on our faces, a pitcher of iced tea between us, and a fresh plate of lemon bars on her lap. They didn't see me at first. Chelsea walked up to the front desk like she owned it. The receptionist, Annie, a young woman with quiet eyes and strong boundaries, smiled politely and listened as Chelsea raised her voice just a little too fast. "She'll want to see us," I heard her say. Annie didn't flinch. If Lorraine has not added you to her visitor list, I'm afraid I cannot page her." David stepped forward then, his voice lower, more desperate. "We're family." Annie kept her calm. "And she's a resident. With rights. I'll ask you to wait outside." They didn't. They turned toward the common room, as if they could just find me by force of memory. But security was already walking over, 2 staff members in matching polo shirts, soft-spoken but firm. Marjorie whispered beside me, "Do you want to go inside?" I shook my head. "No, I want them to see." Because they needed to understand. The door they slammed shut behind me wasn't still cracked open. They don't get to wander back in now that it's cold outside. One of the security guards approached them. "Ma'am, sir, this is private property. I'll have to ask you to return to your vehicle." Chelsea spotted me then, across the garden. She froze for a split second. Then she stormed toward me, dragging David behind her. I didn't stand, didn't flinch, just looked her dead in the eye, and waited. "You're seriously going to sit there while your family gets dragged out like criminals?" she hissed, too close, her voice sharp. "No," I said, calm as the breeze. "You're being asked to leave like guests who were never invited." She blinked, stunned. David stepped forward. "Mom, we're sorry." But I raised my hand, palm open, soft. "You're sorry now that you lost the house. You're sorry because you lost access. But you weren't sorry when you watched her scream at me, or when you let me cook every night while you watched TV." Chelsea's mouth opened, closed. I shook my head. "I did leave, just like she told me to. The problem is, you thought I'd come back begging." I stood now slowly, not with anger, but with dignity. "You didn't ask me to leave with respect, so don't expect to return with it." The security guard was behind them now, waiting. I nodded once, and they turned. Chelsea pulled her arm from David's grasp, muttering under her breath. But this time, she didn't scream. Because some silences speak louder than her entire tantrum ever could. When they were gone, Marjorie handed me another lemon bar. "You're stronger than I would have been," she said. I shook my head gently. "No, I'm just finally being the woman I always told myself I was." The house sold in 8 days. Alvin called me early on a Tuesday, voice barely able to contain his surprise. 2 full-price offers. 1 cash. "You ready to sign, Lorraine?" I looked out my window at the morning sun pooling over my quilt. I've been ready for a long time. We finalized the sale on a Friday. No drama, no delays, no more pretending. The check cleared into the new trust I'd set up with Alvin, one that safeguarded the assets from relatives who might suddenly remember how much they loved me. He handled everything with precision. The new fiduciary, a sharp woman named Brenda, made sure every clause was ironclad. No unapproved withdrawals, no changes without my signature, no inheritance for anyone who'd once treated me like a spare room and a bank account. In other words, no more loopholes. Chelsea and David received the official notification a few days later. The house had sold, and they were no longer associated with the property in any legal capacity. I wasn't there when they got the news, of course, but I got the aftermath. David sent a text, "So we're really out, huh?" That was it. Not even a question mark. Just a sentence floating in digital space like a balloon he didn't know how to pop. I didn't respond, because there was nothing left to say. They didn't lose the house because of a misunderstanding. They lost it because they gambled my loyalty would last longer than their cruelty. And they were wrong. Chelsea never texted again. But Marjorie, bless her, told me everything anyway. They're in a 1-bedroom across town. I heard it from Denise, who knows their upstairs neighbor. I raised an eyebrow. "You're spying for me now?" Marjorie grinned. "I call it community observation." We laughed. Not bitterly, not smugly. Just the kind of laugh that comes when something heavy's finally been set down for good. That weekend, I hosted my first full book club at the condo. 6 chairs, real wine glasses, a lemon tart that I made from scratch and served without anyone calling it too tart or not enough chocolate. We read The Year of Magical Thinking, talked about grief, boundaries, what it means to grow older without shrinking. One woman, Eleanor, said something that stayed with me. Sometimes it's not the death of a person that frees you. It's the death of the version of yourself that kept letting them in. And just like that, I realized this wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about taking anything from Chelsea or David. It was about returning everything back to me. My time, my choices, my name, my voice. I smiled. That's what happens when you stop asking for permission to exist. And in the stillness of that moment, with the paperwork done and the keys turned in and the past folded shut, I knew the truth. They called me worthless, but I was the foundation, and I'll be standing long after they forget where the